Welcome to my brand new show called Finding Joy in the Mundane, and I'm so excited to have you. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you'll be with me on this journey to discover what actual joy looks like and how to find it. Because I think a lot of people don't know how to find joy. They look for it, but it's something that always passes them by, and they find it in other people, but they can't seem to find it themselves. And I wanted to create this safe place to where we can talk about the hardships and suffering that just living in this world brings. And hopefully, through talking about it, we can find the actual joy that's in it. So, in reality, it really is finding joy through suffering. And as a person who has been through a lot, I can definitely say it's hard to see joy when you are going through a lot in life, when you've been handed a hand that you didn't even think that you deserved. It was really hard for me to find joy because I was stuck in the past. I lived my future based on what I experienced in the past. So I never saw anything good coming. I was always scared of what was coming because growing up, I experienced a lot of instability and chaos. And if that's what the world had to offer me, then I already experienced enough to where I'm good. I'm set to go to heaven. And that wasn't what God had in store for me. And I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why He would allow me to suffer so much. And I guess gain so little from it. And I think that was where my issue came, was my perspective, in that I didn't know how to find it in what I was given. So I do want to tell you a little bit more about myself. So whenever you're watching my show, you can know that where I'm coming from and what I'm saying and how I've developed the ideas and the things that I say on this show. Because I wouldn't want to listen to anyone who I don't know. So I want you to know me. Currently, I am a wife. We're about to celebrate our 6-year anniversary, December 16th. We had a Christmas wedding. It was beautiful. Um, Now we have a 2.5-year-old daughter who looks just like me and unfortunately has my stubbornness. So now I'm paying the price again. My poor mother, I never understood what it was like to raise me until I had my daughter. And now I call my mother every day and I say, thank you, thank you, thank you for dealing and suffering with me. My mother had a hard time raising me because she adopted me along with my sisters at 16. And anyone who's ever raised a teenager knows that is not the age you want to come and first meet someone. But she was willing to take that step for and with me. When I first met her, I was in foster care, had been in there for 2 years, separated from my sisters, because it's hard whenever you raise your sisters to then hand them over to someone you don't know. So I decided to step back and just be in foster care on my own while they had each other. And I was grateful that they had each other. But as for me, I didn't really have anyone. I kind of just went by foster care and just hoped that one day I would have a family. I just hoped one day that I would have a family. And being at that age and realizing that you don't have one anymore is hard because I know my parents, I know my mama, I know my baba, I know where I was raised. I was born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon, which is the southern border of Israel. The southern border of Israel. We're very connected. I still talk to them to this day. I continually go to Lebanon every chance I get, every summer. When COVID hit, that made it really hard. So I haven't been there since. And that's even been harder. But that's later to come, how I got to that point. Back then, I had just come to the States when I was 12 with my sisters and my mother. Because of the war that was happening at that time, she developed schizophrenia. So she wasn't in her right mind whenever she brought us here. And because of that, we struggled and were homeless for a few months, back and forth, to where we'd stay at an apartment and then go back to homelessness, stay at parks, go back to the apartment. And it never felt like home. And I just didn't understand why God would have me be bouncing around like this. After a year of living here, I had gotten very sick, some sort of stomach virus that led to me having to be hospitalized because my mother didn't know how to take care of it. So I had a neighbor having to come and kidnap me and take me to the hospital. And when the hospital staff realized that she wasn't my mother, they had questions, and questions led to more questions, and that led to foster care. And I never understood why God would do that, why he would rip me from my entire life and then plop me into this new life with people I don't know, don't trust. Not to mention, I didn't know the language nor the culture. So it really felt like I was an alien in some other world that didn't know me and didn't like me. I didn't like me at that point. I was a mess. I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know how to make friends. I bounced from house to house, angry and frustrated and sad all the time because I just couldn't understand why this was happening. And I wanted to blame social services. I wanted to blame the government. I blamed my mother. I blamed my father. And I blamed them up until I graduated high school. Once I graduated high school, my adopted parents allowed me to go back to my past. So allowed me to go back to England and then go back to Lebanon and meet my biological father and ask him these hard questions of how could you leave us? Why did you leave us? And his answer was simple. It was a very complicated situation. And at the end of the day, he tried his best and it didn't work. And I was looking for someone to blame. And sitting in front of me was the person I have blamed. And realizing that the only thing that he did was not be strong enough to handle the crazy situation we were in. The courts would not allow him to take us back to Lebanon because it was a terrorist state. So we had to move to England, and he had to quit his job, and he had to sell his pharmacy, move to England, find a house, find a job. And at this point, I don't think I would have been able to do it. And that's what I realized, was that he wasn't perfect. And neither was I. So I decided to forgive him and to just continue moving on, moving and living my life and finding whatever happiness and joy I can. So that led to me going to college. I went to college at Radford University. Shout out. And I loved parts of it. Not every minute, because in the beginning, I struggled with finding the right friends, finding who I am. I first became a sorority girl who drank and partied because that's what they told me was the best way to live your life. That's how you find your happiness. That's how you build long-term friendships. So I did. And by the end of my freshman year, I looked at my life and I realized it was so empty and I didn't know why. So I started looking. I looked at my life and I said to myself, okay, what is missing? And the sense of home, the sense of belonging is what was missing. And I didn't know how to find that. So I just continually searched until finally I came across this Christian organization called Crew. And I remember my first time going, it was overwhelming because I walk in and there's a whole bunch of people I don't know doing things and saying things. I have no idea what they're saying. Not that I didn't know English. I knew English at that point, but it was that Christianese, like the terms that they use that I wasn't familiar with. So I did feel like an outsider until I went into the main meeting and the person leading it started talking about Jesus and talking about belonging to him. And all I can feel was this sense of calm and peace wash over me. And I felt like home for the first time. And I thought that was weird. So I kept going and continually met people until finally, I guess it came to a point where I had to either join them or leave, because you always come to that point where you do either you follow God or you don't. And I didn't even know that that's the point I came to, because it was just about going to a fall retreat. It was so simple. It just had to be me going off into the wilderness with some people I don't know, camping. And now that I say it out loud, that is a hard thing to do, especially when you don't have a camping bag. So I said, okay, if I find a camping bag, then I'll go. And all of a sudden, I call up my friend who is the most unreliable friend and to see if she had one. And she did. So I was like, I guess I have to go. So I went. I got in a car, in a person's car that I did not know, with people I had never met. And that's when I met one of now my best friends, Cha-Cha, and how they transformed my entire life through that weekend. Having them was great because I got to see what their faith looked like. And it was curious to me because I had never seen that. Growing up as a Sunni Muslim, I only have one way of seeing God, and that's Allah. But that was all I knew, was that I had to live up to his standard because he was holy. But seeing the way they talked to God and worshiped him, it made me start to have questions. How could you have such freedom in your faith? Because that was one thing I always lacked in Islam, is that feeling of like freedom. I never felt free to have the faith that I did. I always felt forced because I had to, because my entire eternal life depended on it. And that didn't feel secure. So watching them and how they interacted made me start asking questions. And then I found myself during the fall retreat asking God those questions and him starting to answer me. And I was shocked because why would he answer me? And I gave my life then to him. I went back to college and I told all my friends that I was quitting everything, quitting drinking, quitting partying. And they all looked at me and laughed because they just thought it was a phase. I thought honestly that it was a phase. I would get in these phases where things feel good and it's a new thing, so I get interested. But the minute it got hard, I didn't want to do it anymore. Because life is hard in itself. Why do something that's hard? So that was what was very interesting about my faith coming into it at that point. Because after I told all my friends, I started going to Bible study and started going to church. And then my friend group just started becoming smaller and smaller. And things got harder and harder because I didn't understand much of the Bible. I didn't understand what the leaders were saying or wanted from me. So I questioned and I searched and I wondered why I haven't left yet. And that was because he gave me joy. I found joy in all the hardships. That looking back, I find joy in me struggling with drinking and constantly feeling guilty and going to God and thinking that he wouldn't love me through it. Now that I'm 30, I realize how ridiculous that is because God is so much bigger than just drinking. But to me, that's all he cared about, is my actions and what I did for him and or what I lacked for him. So now I look back and see God's grace in it. And that brings me joy. Even though when I was going through it, it was so hard. I wanted to quit every time because I would see myself struggling and then see other people who were Christians who were not struggling. They were somehow able to do it all, be that perfect Christian that never did anything wrong. And I just didn't know how to be that. So ultimately, I thought God would never want me. But I think at that point, he was teaching me the kind of God he was and the kind of God I wanted to worship. And when I was told that I was made in the image of God, I was shocked to find that to be true. Because I am such a broken person that I could never be made in the image that is perfect and holy. But then going through the Bible and reading through scripture, it started changing the way I saw myself and the way I saw God. And the number one question that kept bothering me was, what kind of God do you want? I asked that throughout my entire college experience, throughout seminary where I met my husband, throughout working at the church, everything is continually, what kind of God do you want to worship? Because the Bible is clear, there are multiple gods in everyone's life. And there's little gods, and then there's God. There's God of the Bible, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then there is the God of that you want to make in your life. And that could be you, that could be Baal, that could be some sort of statue that you've decided that is worth something. I don't know. And we see it all over the world where people have decided these things are God to us. So the question kept coming, what kind of God do you want to worship? And that was really hard to answer because at that point I had known of a lot of gods. And mostly it was the Islamic Allah and then Jesus. And if I had to believe and truly trust that Jesus was my God, I had to learn how to trust him. And that was the hardest point of my life because I didn't even trust myself. How could I trust something I've never even seen, never even met? But then reading the scriptures, again, I'm going to come back to it. And I wasn't sure where they were saying it. It could have been in the Bible. It could have been from the Torah. Even though the Torah is part of the Bible, you know what I'm saying, the Christian scholars, you know. But like, I never saw for myself until I went to seminary. And then I realized the importance of seeing someone pick up this book and read it. So that way you would pick up this book and read the same thing because it's the same verses. It's just finding them and reading them fully. I will never take anything out of context. That is something that I feel very strongly about. I will always read the whole story or summarize the story and read the verse that I'm talking about. But it's always in regard to the story at that time, because that's how the Bible was written. It was written full of stories that happened at that time. It's a literal history book. And seeing how God has worked in generation after generation made me realize he's been the same God since the very beginning, saying the same thing from the very beginning. It's just really hard to find that and see that. So I'm going to read in Exodus, part of the beginning, Exodus 19, 3-7. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. Lebanon is part of Israel. Always has been, always will be. We're part of the promised land. Read the Bible." And reading that now, I look at that and it reads different to me because it resonates different. Because now I feel like he's actually speaking to me. And that holds a different weight to it. And I still don't fully understand what me being from Lebanon or any of it means. But it has given me an extra layer that I really do find a lot of joy in. Because then I see God speaking to me and who I am that he would speak to me. Back to verse 4. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations, you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. The fact that I am a treasured possession to the God of the universe is something I will always struggle believing. Because what on earth does a human being have to offer the God who made them? But we are. We keep reading more into chapter 20, and he repeats himself again. And this has to do with the 10 Commandments. So all the Christians out there who have been raised on this and have heard about the 10 Commandments, Moses, and all of that, these are the verses I'm talking about. And this is what I'm trying to show you, is that it's within the context. It's within the verses, his love and the joy that comes with it. So the 10 Commandments, they say, and we all know them: don't commit adultery, honor your parents, do not murder. That's a big one. But it begins with, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. And I have heard that verse since becoming a Christian over and over again. And I never understood it until now, when I reread it in the perspective that I have now. And that's, I guess, what it takes to finally be able to understand. And that's why I wanted to do the show, because I wanted to be able to share this and to share what he was talking about. Because back then, what he was talking about is Israel worshiping other gods that they saw the other nations worshiping. They saw other nations bowing down, sacrificing, burning incense to gods that they never even heard of, but they heard that the other nations were worshiping them. So they thought, well, I should worship them too, because they wanted to get what they were getting. But it was very clear that he was saying, do not do that. He only had one requirement, and that was just to worship him. And now, continually reading through the Old Testament, and I read about how the other gods, what they required of the people who worship them, such as child sacrifice. So we all know about the Aztecs, how they sacrificed their own human blood to these volcanoes and gods. And we were never able to put the two together. And finally, I was. And I realized these people were sacrificing their own children to these other gods, so that way they can get what they thought they wanted, so that they can get the security, so that they could get rain coming, so they can get food. It's understandable. If I had to depend on God for my own food every day, and I was starving because of a famine, it would be very, very tempting to start looking at the other nations and be like, well, they have food, they have water. Yes, they sacrifice their children, but at least they're living, and that's what they had to offer. But God had himself to offer. He said, worship me, love me, don't go to them, and let me be faithful. Let me prove his power, everything. But we're humans. We're impatient, we get scared, we just want the quickest solution to our problems. So they didn't wait on God. They didn't wait on his faithfulness. And that's what we see going through all of Exodus and Deuteronomy and Judges and Ruth and 2 Samuel and 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Azariah, Esther, Job, Psalms, all the way up to the New Testament, where we see nations, and especially Israel, the chosen people who were the treasured possession of God, turning to these other gods because they wanted the quickest solution, and they were willing to do whatever it took, except love God, the Lord. They were willing to give up their own children and sacrifice them into the fire than to have the strength and patience and endurance to wait on the Lord to provide. Even though they've had all those chapters, all those things showing that he always did, that he never ever abandoned his people. Yet even with having this entire record of God providing, they still chose other gods, other idols to turn to. And now, living in the modern Western world, it's different. But at the same time, it's the same. And that's why it's so interesting, the fact that even though it's been thousands of years separate, we are still struggling with the same thing. Struggling with provision, struggling with security, struggling with having faith in the Lord and trusting that he will provide, and that we can go to Instagram, we can go to Facebook, we can go to Sports Network, we can go to any website we want in order to provide us any kind of gratification we want. But that gratification always, one, comes with a price, and two, will always leave us more empty than when we came. And I know that from experience. You go to something, you give yourself to it, you allow yourself to experience it, and then all of a sudden you feel empty. And now you need to do more and more. But when God fills you, when he provides, it's a type of filling and provision that lasts, that satisfies our soul, that doesn't come with strings. And maybe that's the reason why people did not want to trust it as much as they trusted the others. Because it made sense that the other gods would want something in repayment. That makes sense to us. That's the world we live in. It makes no sense that the God of the universe would care for us and just provide for us because he loves us. That's outrageous. Everything comes at a price. And his price, God's price, the Lord's price, was love, to love him wholeheartedly. And the other gods were your children, your time, your body, your heart, anything. And we can at least make peace with giving those up versus feeling indebted to a God that just gave it to you freely. But we don't know what that looks like in any other part of our life. So we can't understand the truth that is in that and the freedom that's in that he's offering. Especially now more than any time, people put their trust in money and power. And that's because it has shown people that money and power can provide you basically with everything you ever wanted, except for the one thing you need, joy. And joy does not come from money, never has. It never came from material things. It never came from achieving the most successful career or the happy family that you've always wanted or the body that you've always wanted to get. Because no matter what you get, you'll always want more. But whenever you feel joy, and when we try to find it in these other gods, other things, then we will always still be thirsty. It's like drinking soda. Everyone who drinks soda knows when you drink it, when you're thirsty, you will continually want more. And once you drink water, you'll be satisfied. But when you drink soda, you'll just be more thirsty. And that's exactly what it's saying. And I think that's exactly why Jesus compares him to himself as the living water, because he's the only thing that once we finally take a drink, we are satisfied. Our cravings, our emotions, our whole entire being calms down and feels at peace. But when we try to take it from other things, it's this crazy rabbit hole that you continue chase until you find yourself depleted and then not knowing where to go. So these are the kind of things that I want to talk about in my show and that I will continue to talk about. I will continue to talk about my family and my adoption, what living in foster care was like, what growing up as a Muslim versus now being a Christian looks like. Even though my family, half my family is Muslim and now half is Christian, even though it was hard for them, they've accepted that this is now a part of me. And they love seeing me grow in it. And that's what I really appreciate. And that's what I hope to be able to give everyone, is that kind of hope and freedom to where they could live their life knowing that someone is for them and could offer them everything that they ever needed and wanted. God is a good God, more than we'll ever know. And he has proven himself over and over again, to not the point where he is good to the point where he'll give us the bare minimum, but that he exceeds any other God, any other idol, any other avenue where we want to get what we want from. That he can not only meet it, but go over it. So that's what I want for my viewers, is to see how God in your life will not only meet your need, but surpass it. And then you'll just continue wanting more of him, just like I do. And, it is a different kind of craving, because it's no longer this itch or this kind of desperate need. It's this quiet ache in your heart that continually just knows where to go when it's thirsty, or when it needs peace, or when it needs rest, or just needs someone to just be there. And I know that a lot of people at this point have heard so many stories about who the Lord is. And I pray that I'm able to show you just a different side, if you're willing to be on this. So thank you so much for watching. And I hope that you will be here with me every Friday at 5, because I will be here and I will just be sharing whatever the Lord puts on my heart. And it's going to be random and it's going to be real. And that's what I have to give. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.